People have always said that Atrena wasn't born. She was made in a forge. The smoke is her breath, the stones are her bones, a heart made of charcoal to stoke her fiery soul, and a will made of iron. Since before she could hold a hammer, she's been in her father's forge. When she was a babe, the only thing that could calm her was the sounds of the forge. The striking of hammer and anvil was the most beautiful music to her. The crackling and popping of the charcoal soothed her soul. Her father Oberian saw the wonder in his daughter's eyes as she watched him and his apprentices work the forge. When she reached her 7th summer, he took her on as an official apprentice. Cleaning the shop, stoking the forge, helping customers, she loved it all. But most of all, she loved helping with the forging. When she turned 18, Atrena completed her apprenticeship. She was recognized by both the nobility and the country's guilds as a blacksmith, but her journey begins there. A baron asked her to come to his territory to become the blacksmith for the village of Cartenia, who had recently lost theirs. With the blessing of her father, Atrena agrees and sets out for Cartenia. It takes her 4 days by carriage to get there. Once she's there, she's given the old blacksmith's forge and small home. She's just arrived at her forge in Cartenia and stepped into the forge for the first time. She's ready for her new beginning here in the countryside, away from the royal capital and its good but hectic days. So that is the headcanon that I made up for this Fire and Hammer box that I'm finally finished with. But let's go over what I did for this last video and what my thoughts are on the box as a whole. I started off using black weathering pigments on the top of the forge's chimney and the forge's opening to give it the feel that it has been used before, but not cleaned in a while. Once I finished with that, I grabbed some of the cork bark pieces from the Army Painter terrain stuff and basing stuff and painted them with a black base coat and lightly dry brushed them with some gray and white on the raised areas to give them the appearance of charcoal in the fire. Then I started with the big stuff that I've never done before. You know, another first, and that's sculpting with milliput. So following the instructions, I threw on some gloves, smushed both parts together, and started following the tutorials from Real Terrain Hobbies. First, I sculpted the anvil. I started with the base of the anvil. I pulled a bit of the milliput off, rolled it into a ball, squished it down into a rough oval shape, and then cut off the ends and the sides to get it to the rectangle shape that I needed. That was the easy part. Making the head of the anvil was a bit trickier. I was going for your traditional anvil. A tapered cylinder on one end to make the horn of the anvil, and a flat top and flat sides on the other end. And trying to do this to scale with the blacksmith model took me a few tries. I think I got it decently, but I'm not 100% sure it looks right. But once I got decently satisfied with the head of the anvil, I made the bit that connects the head to the base, which was fairly easy. Once I got the main square shape made, I grabbed the sculpting tools included in the Fire and Hammer box, and I worked on making the transitions better. You know, so it kind of looked like one solid object. Like the center part would transition down into the bottom and up into the head of the anvil. Like I said, I think it turned out okay. I don't think it looks great because it is my first time sculpting anything with milliput. If you guys have any suggestions on, like, you know, a good way to improve sculpting other than, you know, practice, leave it in the comments. Let me know so I can grow my skills with it. Once I got done with the anvil, I moved on to making the stump that would be under it. Because, you know, normally blacksmith anvils have a stump under them for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm honestly not. I think it's to, like, dissipate the vibrations, maybe? I'm not sure. But with the stump, the hardest thing was trying to find the right height at the scale I'm working on, so that, like, the stump and anvil looked like something the blacksmith model would use. I had to cut off and restart a few times to get it the correct height, but eventually I think I got it to a good height. Then I just pressed down the top to flatten it and the bottom and just rounded out the sides. Once I was done with that, I grabbed the sculpting tools again to carve into the sides and top and tried to make it look like bark and the rings that are, you know, you get with a stump, but I don't think it turned out too well. So that'll be something to try again, is just trying to carve bark or like adding texture to something that I sculpted. Once I was finished with the stump though, I put the anvil on top, checked to make sure it was all the correct height that I want it to be so it looks correct, and then I just set it off to the side. And since I still have a little bit of milliput left that I mixed up, I decided to make a pillow for the house's upper floor where the bedding's going to be. I just did what you do as a kid when you're playing with Play-Doh. I rolled it in between my hands and made it into kind of like a tapering cylinder or a worm shape and got it to the right size that I needed it to be at. Just left it up there, left it where it was going to be. But after getting to that right size, I saw that I still had a little bit of milliput left. So I decided to make a nest in the bridge section between the shop and the house, since I'm not going to put like the cat or the squirrel or anything in there. I just wanted something in there as like a little bit of an Easter egg. So all I did was take the milliput, flatten it out, and then made a bowl shape using the sculpting tools that I had. Then I just put it inside the bridge section, did a little bit more sculpting in there to kind of make it like fit in a corner. And to kind of add a little bit of texture to it, I grabbed some scrap pieces of balsa that were small and I stuck them in there. After that, I let everything sit for 24 hours to harden. The next day, I came back and sculpted a blanket for the upstairs bedding area using more milliput. I just flattened out a chunk of it and made it thin enough so that it kind of feels like a blanket. And I just laid it out on the second floor. I sculpted it a little bit over the pillow, had it roll back on itself like a blanket would do. I may have also made it a little bit, unrealistic with it kind of curling back like a wave and just stopping there instead of going all the way down so it sits on the rest of the blanket, which, it could be a problem eventually, but that's an eventually thing. And I also decided that this is where I'm going to put the kitten that I printed and painted off. So I made some ripples in the blanket to try and give the appearance of like the cat rolling around and sleeping on the blanket up there. While I waited for the blanket to harden, I decided to make the rain cover for the forge. I grabbed the cork board from the kit, cut out a square that would work for it. Then I cut a strip of cork and cut it into pieces. After doing that and looking at how it would look like stacked up and the stuff leaning against it, I decided not to use multiple pieces of cork for that. Instead, I just used one piece for each side and slanted the big piece down on the other. So it kind of like, it makes kind of a tent opening. I glued those pieces together, and once the super glue was set, I just started painting everything. Starting with the rain cover, I started with a fairly dark gray base coat that I brushed on. Then I grabbed a piece of sponge and I just swiped and dabbed a lighter gray, a white, and a black onto that cover to try and make it kind of look like the rest of the stone in the chimney. I don't think I got the right mix because it kind of stands out a little bit more than all the other stone, since it's not like the same shade of gray as the rest of it for its base coat. I still like it, and I think it works, but it probably should be a little bit lighter. Once I got that all painted, I just glued it to the top of the forge where it's going. Then I moved on to painting the anvil and the stump. I gave them another black base coat and then used the included silver paint for the anvil and a combination of brown and white for the sides of the stump and a brown, white, and yellow mix for the top of the stump. I'll be honest, I think the stump looks like crap and I probably should repaint it because I'm not really liking the color, since I think I mixed too much white with the brown for the sides of the stump to make it far too light for like actual bark. I probably should have done a brown and black on there, but hey, it happens. You screw up the paint job a little bit sometimes. Once I finished painting the anvil and stump, I decided to paint the bedding on the second floor of the house. I decided to just go with like a plain green. No other colors added in for the base coat, just plain green. Once I painted the pillow and blanket green, I did take a little bit of white and mix it in, and then kind of just dry brushed and edge highlighted the blanket and the pillow with it, just to add in like a little bit of contrast. Once the paint was dry, I glued the kitty in place. Then I worked on finishing up the forge. I debated for a while if I should glue the tea light in place for the inner part of the forge, just because it might burn out the LED in there, or I might want to replace it with something else, like an LED noodle light at some point when I get into soldering and doing lighting effects. Kind of foreshadowing content there at some point. Not right now, not anytime soon, I think, but the idea is there. And at the end of the day, I just said screw it and I glued it in place. Just so it's there, and if I have to, I can probably pull it apart and pull it out. Maybe, who knows? It is hot glued in there. After that, I pulled apart some cotton balls that were included with the kit and glued them into the forge to dissipate the light and obscure the shape of the flame. This and putting the charcoal in there were a pain in the ass because it was such a small area and there was so much stuff in the way. But I got it all in there and I am happy with it. While I get the charcoal in place here, I just want to say that I really enjoyed working on this diorama, but I don't think I'll work on something like this again. And I mean that in the sense of following a tutorial series of how to make a big project like this blacksmith shop. Neil from Real Terrain Hobbies made a really good tutorial series on making this and how to do certain steps. But for me, there's always things that I question when it comes to tutorials and following them. And next time I would probably do it differently if I did do it again. One of the main ones for me would be the forge. I would have rather done everything with the charcoal, cotton smoke, and painting it inside before it was glued down, because I think it would have made it easier to work with, just so you could get to all of the corners and stuff. Like, even before putting on anything else, I think I would have left one side off of the forge and just done everything in there and then been like, okay, put that other side on, glue it on, call it good. It's just small changes like that that I think I would make if I were to do this again and do it in a little bit of a different order. Not to take anything away from his tutorials, it's just my own thinking. And once I was done with gluing all the stuff in place in the forge, I put everything else in place and glued it. The blacksmith model, the anvil with its stump, and the squirrel were all glued in place around the diorama. Then I remembered the nest in the bridge, and I quickly painted all of that brown and did like very basic kind of edge lighting with a white-brown mix. Or edge highlighting, I should say. After that, there's one more thing that I said I wanted to do. I talked about it all the way back in, I think, the shingle step, and that is magnetizing the bridge's roof so that it could come off more easily. This was a good idea and a bad idea at the same time. So I used the pin drill that I have, which I think that's what it's called. I'm not sure though. And I drilled 4 holes in the bottom of the roof and put a bit of super glue and a magnet in there, which it was kind of a pain in the ass to do, but they got in there because sometimes they didn't want to stay in there. Then I did the same thing on the supports for the roof, which was even more of a pain in the ass because there's such a small area to drill into that it's hard to keep the drill straight and lined up with where the other magnets are going to be. So it took a bit of doing, but I was able to get all 4 magnets in there and everything kind of lines up and it holds it there decently. They're not super powerful magnets, so it's not like locked there really tightly, but just enough. And before I put all of the magnets on the supports, I did go and cut off the 2 pieces that were used to lock in the roof there that you're supposed to glue it to, so that they would be out of the way for trying to go and hook it on there. Then to put this whole thing to bed, I took some of the black weathering pigment and I put it into a glass, then sprayed the copper pipe that I made from the straw a long time ago with water, rolled in the pigment, and to give it the look of soot at the top of the pipe. Like, it's kind of been used, but not like a lot. Then I just glued the pipe to the top of the house, and that's it. I'm finished with this blacksmith diorama. So I really enjoyed working on this. I thought it was a ton of fun, and it really challenged me to learn something new and learn different techniques and just do this for the first time. Just working on something like this for the first time. And I had a ton of fun with it. And I can't wait to go into the next big project. But I will say this, I'm never doing something like this again. It's not that I'm not going to make dioramas. I want to make some of them. I have some ideas and I want to make some of them. But I'm not going to follow a strict, well, not a strict, a kind of loose tutorial for making the whole thing. I think I'd rather learn my own way of just trying it and failing and trying again. Because this was a nice beginner way of learning and starting out, but from here on, I want to learn in my own way. because everybody learns differently, and this is a good starting point, but now it's time to go on my own. Especially when I have the big Deadlands project that I'm working on coming up, which might not be here till next year, because I want to do a good amount of like mini painting and stuff. And to mention, you know, some other projects and some other stuff with this channel, I've changed the channel name to Crafts and Hobbies, Sandman's Crafts and Hobbies, because I want to do crafting stuff, I want to do miniature painting and hobby stuff. There's also other hobbies and art stuff that I want to do and I want to talk about, and I want to share with you guys what I've been working on in those. So I'm going to start doing that along with all the miniature stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed like this whole series of me building this, and I hope you'll stick around for what comes next. But other than that, I hope you guys have a royal day or a royal night whenever you're watching this. And I'll talk to you later. I'll give you a hint for the next thing. We're working on those Necrons, but we're also going to make some decks for Magic the Gathering, because I'm getting into that again. So I got another time and money sink in there. But I'll see you in the next one.